Totally wrong facts you probably still believe. Let's see what this is about.
Completely wrong facts that people still believe. The Great Lie of China. If you actually ended up becoming one of the fortunate few people who achieved their childhood goal of becoming an astronaut, you would at some point have the opportunity to go to space. And during that time in space, if you happened to look down at the Earth, you would at some point find the Great Wall of China, right? We all know that the Great Wall of China is visible to the naked eye in space because of its sheer massive size. But what if I told you that wasn't the case at all? And the origins of this folktale actually date back to
I think I've heard
comic
this.
books.
This
Let
is
me
like
explain.
a mainstream
There is
one.
no doubt that the Great Wall of
This is
China
the- yeah,
is
this
one
one's
of the
mainstream.
coolest man-made structures on this entire planet. The history, the architecture, the grandeur, it's all insane. And because of that, the Great Wall was a perfect candidate for
Actually
the
is kinda
perfect
crazy
lie. And this lie
how
actually
big it
dates
is.
back as far as
Even if you can't see it from
1932.
space,
During
it's
this
like-
time, Ripley's Believe It or Not, yeah,
That's
the people
wild.
that made the best book at the book fairs were doing short stories and comic strips. And potentially one of their most iconic comic strips stated that the Great Wall of China was the mightiest work of man, and that it was the only man-made structure
Pyramids?
that was visible not from space, but from the
Not the
moon.
pyramids?
The comic goes on to state other facts and information about the Great Wall of China, but that first line about the Great Wall being seen from space was not only an unsubstantiated claim, but was also enough to get people hooked, line, and sinker. And from that point on, this wild claim made before anybody even went to space was just taken as fact. And well, the myth still persists to this day.
Well, the moon
Now, I
landing
would
was
say
in
it's more or less
1967.
common sense that you can't see any one specific man-made structure on Earth from the moon, but I can see where it gets a bit dicey when you swap the moon for space. But with the construction of the International Space Station, it has been confirmed by numerous astronauts that the Great Wall of China is not visible to the naked eye from space. Astronauts have
What is the
claimed
point
that
of
they
lying
have seen
about
the Great
that,
Wall
then?
of China, but it has required magnification. But on top of
Isn't that
required
around the Cold War,
magnification,
too?
they also need to be extremely focused
Wait, we gotta discover Ripley's Believe It or Not. We gotta investigate. If they claim that, but wasn't that during the time of the Cold War? Where it was like, that's like Chinese propaganda?
on where they're looking because the Great Wall of China
Somebody's
blends
gotta look
into
into
the landscape so well.
Someone's
The
gotta
brown
look
and
into
gray
that.
bricks on the wall don't necessarily contrast super well from the brown trees and dirt. And for that reason, unless you know exactly where to look and you have a bit of magnification, you're not going to see the Great Wall of China from space. And you'd have a much better bet looking from a commercial airplane, assuming you knew where to look
Yeah,
and it was clear.
obviously.
Now, to add a bit of insult to injury, astronauts
Wait,
have
actually,
also
no.
claimed that there are
What?
other man-made structures that are
Okay. You can't even see the ground 30,000 feet up. How would you be able to see something from space like that? Actually, well, I don't know if that's true because you can't look straight down when you're in an airplane. Wait. So every time I've been in an airplane, I can't see the ground, but it's just because I can't look. Can you see the ground? If you could look through the bottom of an airplane, could you see the ground? Or is it just like blue?
are way easier to spot from space, with those structures being
Actually,
way less important
thought
than the
about
Great
that.
Wall of China, specifically airstrips and large stretches of road. And the reason for that is simply because of contrast. The dark black tarmac used to make roads and airstrips is much more visible. And on top of that, these simple structures are typically
What is he
very
talking
straight.
about?
And as some of you may know,
Still
straight
China?
lines do
Great
not
Wall?
exist in nature. So for those two reasons, these simple structures stand out a lot more than the Great Wall of China. So yeah, the Great Wall of China is cool, but it's not visible from space cool. Which, please, I would say it's safe to assume that most people watching this
What?
video are familiar with the hysteria-induced Salem witch trials of
Yes.
1692. And while the witch trials happened and were
1692.
crazy, there are a ton
Imagine being
of
alive in
myths
that
and
time.
misconceptions surrounding the Salem witch trials.
That's
so for
actually
that
absurd.
reason, I'm gonna kind of speed run a bunch of Salem witch trial myths.
Speedrun,
because
hey.
we are getting into the
Speedrunning
spooky season.
Minecraft
Okay,
on,
for starters, it wasn't
stream every day.
just women that were being accused of witchcraft. During this time, everybody was
got a
hysterical,
wife
and
beater
nobody was
head.
safe from a
What?
demon being accused of witchcraft. During this time, everybody was hysterical, and nobody was safe from a demonic or witchcraft allegation. And while it is a fact that mostly women were accused and prosecuted, a quarter of the people that were killed during the Salem witch trials were actually men. This may or may not be surprising, but what probably is surprising is the
Seriously?
fact that it wasn't only humans that were killed during the Salem witch trials. There was at
What?
least 2 dogs confirmed to be killed
Really? At
because they
least
were
2
accused and
dogs?
found guilty of witchcraft. And in these dogs' cases
That is
specifically, they were found
idiotic,
guilty of
though.
being under the influence of witchcraft, which means that it wasn't even their fault, but they still died because of it, and that is sad. And speaking of deaths, I
How
think the
dumb were
most
people back
common
then?
misconception about the Salem
Genuinely,
witch trials
how
was that
stupid
witches
do you
were
have to
burned
be.
at the stake. And while it's undeniable that at least
loves
20
Minecraft.
people were killed during the Salem witch trials, none of them were burned. That's right, 19 of them were hung, and one of them was crushed to death by rocks. Now, if you're saying to yourself, I know for a fact witches were burned at the stake, you're right. But it did not happen in Salem. All of the burnings that happened took place in Europe. And while the Salem witch
What?
trials only lasted roughly a year, there was multi-year long hysteria and witch hunts that took place over in Europe that claimed the lives of thousands. And over there, they were burning witches left, right,
How did they get the memo over there to Europe? Because there's no way it's just a coincidence that at the same time, the U.S. and Europe are thinking people are witches.
and center. And I find that a
People
bit
are
interesting.
traveling
because Salem
across
is now
the
forever
Atlantic
bound
Ocean
to
and
the
like, oh,
concept
look,
of
there's
witch hunts
witches.
and
And then
witch
everybody
trials.
else starts to
Although
believe it.
compared to the witch trials that took place in Europe, what happened in Salem
Imagine
was
if these
really
people had
a drop in
phones.
the bucket.
They
Not to
would
say that it was
literally
okay, but,
see
I mean,
AI and be
compared to
like,
20
oh my
deaths
God,
versus
dolphins
1,000,
have
I
legs
think they
now.
associate the practice with the Europeans. Or at least the Europeans.
Were they seriously that stupid?
God, that was so dumb. Razor sharp lies. When I was a young, naive little bro, I was once told that if you shaved your face, your
Little
facial
bro.
hair would grow back thicker, fuller, and darker. In hearing this as like a 13, 14-year-old bro, all I wanted to do
Stop
was
saying
shave,
little bro
because I
and
really
bro.
wanted to have some cool facial
Say
hair and
dude.
seem older than I was, like every other kid does. I remember shaving and shaving.
That's weird. I feel like nowadays, if you have like a mustache,
And bleeding a lot.
if you have a mustache like before 10th grade, people make fun of you for that, I feel like. They're like, oh, look, he's got a mustache.
But never making any facial hair progress.
Yeah,
And
kids
I
are-
actually
kids
ended
are
up
so
giving up on
dumb.
the practice before I ever learned the truth. And if you had a
Just
similar
bullying
situation,
for no
well,
reason.
welcome to the club. Because a lot of people have not only heard this myth,
Giving up on shaving every day and hopes to get a thicker beard without even finding out that it was a myth the whole time club.
but actively fall for it every single day. The origins of this myth, interestingly, are unknown. Although clinical studies disproving this myth date back all the way into the 1920s. Which just goes to show how prolific this myth is. Because we have literally had clinical
Actually,
studies
what?
for almost 100 years proving that
People
shaving
were
does
still be
not
saying
affect
that?
your hair thickness,
Still
but
were
people
be
still
saying that?
believe it. And
It's
while
just-
it actually has no physical effect, appearances are something we can discuss. And here's what I mean by that. When you shave, the razor cuts the hair on the surface of the skin, but it has no effect on the follicle deep below the skin. The hair that was on your face went from a long pointed tip to a short nub. And this little nub of hair can feel coarser as it begins to
starts
grow out.
to
And if you
grow.
couple this short-lived bluntness of the freshly shaved hair with the fact that the new hair that is growing hasn't yet been exposed to any chemicals or sunlight to lighten it, then you may feel like this new freshly
Who
shaved
uses
hair is coming back
Barbasol?
thicker
That does not
and
even-
darker.
that looks
But
like
in reality,
motor
it's
oil or
more or less
something.
of an optical illusion that typically only lasts a
What is
few
that?
days. The ladies are gonna know what I'm
Soap?
talking about. You know, if you shave your legs and then a few days later your legs feel prickly, that's because of the blunted, coarse hair. You're not getting hairier or growing new hair, it's just the hair that was there needs some time to grow that fine tip again. And if there really was any truth to this myth, don't you think shaving your head would become the #1 remedy for baldness? I mean, to be fair, it kind of is the #1 remedy or solution, but not because it grows your hair back. It just prevents you from looking like Murr from Impractical Jokers. But yeah, while
That's
there
crazy.
are genuine methods of regrowing hair and making your hair thicker, shaving is not one of them. And I'm glad it's not.
I feel like if people kept some things from when they were a kid, like as you're a kid, when I was a kid and I watched the Practical Jokers, I never thought about how bad Murray's hairline is. But now that I'm old enough and I see it, it's literally, it's unreal.
Because
I
that
feel like if people stopped paying attention to that stuff when they became adults, it would be a lot more peaceful.
would literally make the entire act counterproductive. The baby bird
He's
belief.
got a
Have you
crazy
ever been
hairline.
out on a walk? When you see a vulnerable, injured baby bird on the sidewalk all by himself, this is a deeply heartbreaking sight. And all you want to do is help out this little baby bird. But right as you kneel down
He's gonna say, if you help it and put it somewhere, it's gonna die.
to
Or
pick
something
up
like
this
that.
bird and put them
I
anywhere
don't know what that
else, your
prediction
friend
was.
tells you, hey, you can't touch this baby bird. If you touch this baby bird, its mom will pick up on your scent and abandon this bird completely. If you touch it, it's gonna die. The best thing you can do is leave it. So then you and your friend continue to walk on the sidewalk.
never
only
heard
for
of
that
this,
bird to get
ever.
run over by a guy on a one-wheel. Tragic. This is a myth that I
is a
definitely
one-wheel?
believed. Actually, up until recently,
Scooter?
honestly, because I never thought about it too much. But I remember hearing this a lot when I was younger. Thinking about it now, it seems like a clever way for parents to make their kids not touch wild animals. But that's about as deep as it goes.
Is that
because
from, like,
this
bird
claim
fever
is
time or
more or less
something?
of a folklore or a myth. When speaking about birds specifically, first of all, birds don't even have a very strong sense of smell to begin with. So scientists
They don't
claim
have
that it's
noses.
highly
They just have
unlikely
little
that a
holes in
bird
their
would eat
mouth.
Have you
Their
ever
beak.
wanted to see your home from space? With this free satellite Earth Maps tool, you can zoom
even be able to tell the difference whether or not their child has been touched by a human or not. And
No, I
regardless of their
didn't.
lack of smell, birds are dedicated parents and go to pretty extreme lengths to ensure the survival of their children, even if that means killing one of their children, which sounds counterproductive, but I mean, if you've got 4 kids, one of them sucks, and you want at least 3 of them to
One
live,
of them
you gotta get rid of the
sucks.
bad one, at least in bird logic. Now, with every myth, there's typically a kernel of truth. The kernel of truth is this. There is specific scenarios where birds will abandon their young, but it's not nearly as simple as, oh, if you touch the baby bird, it's done. What typically causes a bird to abandon its nest is if the bird's nest is simply too hostile to continue to live in. If the nest is consistently visited or even threatened by predators on a regular basis, and the bird's babies are still in the egg stage, then the parents may make the tough decision of abandoning the nest to begin a new one in a safer location. Although, if the chicks have been hatched, it's going to take a lot to scare away a parent bird from its nest. Although every bird is different, and there's definitely a fluctuation on commitment.
That's kinda
when it
cool. I
comes
feel
to
like-
bird parents. The general
I feel like birds are the only mainstream animal that actually have like houses that they build. I can't think of any others. Everybody else just like digs a hole. That's lame.
consensus
Birds
is
actually,
that
like,
birds that
assemble a
live
whole
longer
building.
are typically more picky and sensitive with their young, and potentially more likely to abandon their children. However, birds that live relatively shorter lives typically tend to be more committed to their children. And what's even more interesting is the fact that this doesn't only apply to birds. There are not many animals that will simply abandon their child because it has been encountered by a human, with one of the notable exceptions being rabbits. Rabbits in general live very high stress lives and can even die from stress if you try to pick one up. But besides
What?
rabbits, most animals are not going to ditch their kids simply because
That is
you touch them.
insane.
Now, with all of this being said,
I've held
I
a
feel
baby
like it's important
rabbit.
to note that
I don't know
you
if its
shouldn't
stress
be
was
touching
working by
baby
then,
animals
by how
in
young it
most
was, but
cases. You don't know what
that is
diseases they
crazy.
have, and they don't know what diseases you have. In most cases, baby animals are not far from their mothers, and even if you don't see them, the parents are typically watching or not too far away. And if you find yourself in a situation where there is a vulnerable baby animal that is in desperate need of your help,
Pick it
don't
up.
neglect it out of fear of it being abandoned. However, if there's a baby animal that you see that's safe, although alone, it's best to leave it alone and assume that the parent is nearby, which is often the case. Although, use your discretion and feel free to call your local animal shelter to get more professional advice. Okay, changing gears. This next myth is crazy, and it's one that people still
Crazy.
believe, once again, to this day. However,
crazy?
today's
How
video
crazy? How
sponsor,
crazy?
5 is here to dispel
Oh,
it.
no
Some
thank you,
people
no thank
believe
you.
that in 2025, full myth. Have you ever been
Mouthful.
watching TV and either seen somebody have a seizure or maybe get knocked out in a fight, only for people to run to the rescue and put them on their side and maybe even put something in their mouth to ensure that they do not swallow their tongue? I know I have, and I can't pinpoint exactly where, honestly, but I know for a fact
Where is this
that I've
guy
heard
from?
that it's not only
What is this?
possible, but a genuine risk that if you become unconscious, whether through sleeping, seizure, or
can't
trauma, that there's a chance that you could swallow your tongue and suffocate. If
No.
you've heard or
You can't
potentially even
swallow
believed
your
this myth,
tongue.
it honestly kind of makes sense. I mean, your
No.
tongue is long, and if you're not actively controlling it, it could potentially go the wrong way. But the truth of the matter is that
People
it is
think you can
physically
swallow your
impossible
tongue?
to swallow your tongue, meaning that this is not a genuine risk unless your tongue becomes detached from your body somehow. It
Literally.
is physically impossible
It's a
to
muscle
swallow
that's
your own tongue, which is a good
stuck.
thing. Now, what's unfortunate
Your tongue
is the
isn't
actual truth
that
of the matter
loose.
and
What?
things that people try to do to prevent tongue swallowing. One of the worst things that somebody can do to prevent
That is the
somebody from
dumbest-
swallowing their tongue is by putting something in the person's mouth. If someone specifically having a seizure has an object inserted into their mouth, it can essentially just become a weapon and causing potentially broken teeth and now a new foreign object being in the mouth of somebody who's unconscious and
Seriously,
seizing, which
you
is
see somebody having a seizure and you put like a mouthful of pizza in their mouth?
genuine danger because this object could be swallowed, which is definitely not good.
The
What
measurement
actually
of pizza
happens
is
if you
called a
become
mouthful, and it
incapacitated?
fits
Well,
perfectly
unless you're
into
seizing,
everybody's
all of your
mouth. It's
muscles are going
universal.
to relax. This includes your tongue, and when your tongue is in a relaxed state, it is possible for your tongue to partially or even completely obscure your
I don't think my
breathing.
tongue can ever
Obviously, this
relax.
isn't swallowing
I'm
your
gonna be
tongue,
thinking
but
about
is
it for the
still
next 20
dangerous.
days.
This phenomenon is extremely common, and it is known in most cases as snoring. Sleep apnea specifically is a result of a partial blockage in your airway during your sleep. But in the case of somebody who's currently seizing, their muscles aren't relaxed whatsoever. One of the bigger risks isn't their tongue falling to the back of their throat, it's actually the individual biting their tongue, and in some cases off. If you thought biting your tongue accidentally when you ate felt bad, imagine unconsciously putting all of
That
the
would
force of your
suck.
jaw onto your tongue for
Ooh.
minutes on end. That is a scary thought.
That's
But
terrible,
in either of
but
these
that's-
situations, whether your body is
yeah.
relaxed or tense, it is impossible to swallow your own tongue, although it doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider it when helping somebody who is unconscious. The best way to really help anybody who's unconscious is to put them into the recovery position, which can prevent tongue issues and allow somebody to vomit without choking on it as well. Here's a quick graphic on how to do the recovery position in case you wanted to know. Honestly,
Hello?
it doesn't hurt to know because it
Cheeky?
literally could save somebody's.
Cheeky blood in it. 3 knees. Fancy a knees up. 4 come on over. .co.uk. I
But
knew this
this
dude.
video isn't about saving lives.
So this guy
It's
has
about
no
disproving
British accent, but
myths.
he's from the
So,
UK.
let's keep going. dead toenail tails.
So
You and
a
the
scooter
neighbor
is
kid
called a
are
one
hanging
wheel.
out. And during this hangout, you guys get bored. And the neighbor kid says, hey, let me show you something. It's pretty cool. You follow him outside and you guys go on a short walk when you end
What's
up
this one
in a
called?
dark building
Dead
in the basement.
toenails?
He turns on the light in this basement and all you see is doors on a wall. The neighbor kid opens one of these doors and pulls out a tray. And on this tray, disturbingly, is a dead body.
Oh, is
You
this
don't
about
even
the
believe
stupid
what you
dead
see
body
first and
with the
assume
tags
you're
on
in
the
a house.
toes?
When the
I-
neighbor kid confirms your worst nightmare, he says, look at this dead person. You reluctantly take a peek and say, yeah, what about it? When he tells you their hair and nails are still growing. Look, I was here yesterday, and their hair and nails weren't nearly this long. At that point, morbid curiosity takes over, and you take a look at their fingernails, which do look a bit long. But then you ask the neighbor kid, wait, you were here yesterday? And then you both decide to stop disturbing the dead and leave. That story, admittedly,
What
was
is
morbid,
that?
but it helps me paint the picture of this next misconception. Seemingly forever now, people have believed that after you die, you still can
Don't you need hydration and like water intake, which is the same as hydration? Don't you need that? That's like a key thing for
continue to have
hair
hair
growth.
and
What?
nail growth for some time after death. And whether or not this is something you've ever heard or believed, the reality is this. No human grows hair or grows their nails after death. Although, similar to the shaving thing, there is a bit of an optical illusion at play, and it is a morbid one. At this point, numerous dermatologists have debunked this myth simply by claiming is what you're seeing when you see potential nail growth or hair growth after someone dies isn't the actual growth of the hair or nails at all. What it is a dehydration of the body causing a retraction of the skin,
Ooh,
appearing
that's
the hair and
gross.
nails to
That is
seem
gross.
larger
That is
or
gross.
longer. And while that may give you some clarity, it still doesn't answer why you're hanging out with a dead body. But seriously, to grow hair and nails,
Yeah,
your
what is that
body needs to be,
situation?
one,
That is a bad
alive,
situation you
two,
set
able
up.
to regulate a complex hormonal
Your
system
friend goes
that
to an
allows the
underground
creation of hair and
area
nails
with
to
a bunch
even
of
happen. And this
lockers
is even
with
a struggle
bodies in
for
them.
some people that are alive, let alone dead people. But
She
meet
got
Will
Jane
Smith's
too?
husband,
Can't
Ellen.
wait to see
further
it.
prove this point, we're going to now show you graphic images
I did
of
Will
dead
Smith.
people. 3,
Craps
2,
this
I am
rock.
just kidding, and I know some of you were kind of looking forward to it, and you need to seek help. Food fairy tales. Admittedly, transitioning from dead people to food isn't ideal, but here we are. And we've got a stinker.
What?
I would argue that most people have at least
Okay,
heard, or
that's
potentially
gross.
even still believe, that eating turkey specifically makes you sleepy. And they might even have evidence to back it up, which I'll quickly explain.
It's called
People
the
that believe
itis.
that turkey makes you
what it
feel
is.
sleepy believe this because there is a chemical known as tryptophan within turkey. Interestingly, there is scientific evidence that shows that tryptophan is involved in sleep and mood control and can even cause drowsiness. And L-tryptophan has even been sold and marketed as a sleep aid. So far, it seems like turkey making
Okay,
you
well, I
sleepy
guess
is proven true, right? But here's where things get interesting. Because while all of this is true, turkey meat is not the only meat that contains
Oh,
tryptophan.
he's saying it like dirty.
Tryptophan. For example, chicken and minced beef also contain
Was that a
nearly the
mustache?
exact same amount of tryptophan, roughly
Okay.
350 milligrams per 150 grams of meat. But besides this, pork and cheese actually have more tryptophan than turkey, which kind of muddies up the equation. a bit,
Turkey,
because
ham, and
nobody
cheese
talks about
sandwich?
eating pork or cheese and then going
Straight
bed,
to
or
sleep?
chicken or beef for that matter. It's
Combine
always
it with
turkey.
some
But
grapes?
to make things even more muddy, L-tryptophan supplements are typically recommended on an empty stomach to help maximize absorption. And if you're eating turkey with,
So?
a Thanksgiving meal,
That's-
with stuffing, with bread,
Yeah,
and
you
other
fill
things,
it up,
your absorption of that
so-
tryptophan is going to be lower than if you were just eating turkey by itself, further reducing its effectiveness. I don't want to get all technical on you, but here's the truth. A lot of people believe that eating turkey specifically makes you sleepy because it's full of tryptophan. And while on the surface that seems like it's plausible, in reality, the
Plausible.
reason why people feel so tired after eating a huge turkey meal, typically on Christmas or Thanksgiving, is because exactly that. They are eating a huge meal, and it's the meal itself that is causing the drowsiness. Any large, solid meal can induce sleepiness because of the increased blood flow and oxygen to the digestive system. And why that is because if there is extra blood and oxygen in your digestive tract, you know where it's not? In your brain. Which
what
means
does
that
this
you're
say?
literally going to feel more lethargic, and in most cases, sleepy.
This is actually
So yeah,
making me
turkey
hungry.
won't make you any more sleepier
I'm gonna
than
eat now.
chicken or beef would. And if you're sitting at Thanksgiving dinner wondering why
Just
your
letting
dad
y'all
is
know.
asleep at the table, it's not because he had too much turkey. It's because he had 14 beers in the garage before dinner. The lazy brain legend. Quickly, if you guys are enjoying this video and would like to see me make another video
Like
on
and
completely
thumbs
wrong
up.
facts,
Same
feel free
thing
to leave
again.
a like or
Oh my
leave a
God.
comment saying part 2. That way I know
Leave
that
a
you guys
comment.
really
Everybody
want
that
a
watches
follow-up
this,
to this video.
if you made it to
Also,
this
if you're
point,
part of the
leave a
70-something%
comment,
of people
and I
that
will like
please
it,
subscribe, feel free to consider it. We make
and
pretty good
I
videos
will
and we
reply
post
to it.
every Friday. Now, let's talk about your lazy
Good
brain. We all know
incentivizing.
that in
Let's go.
2025, there is an endless supply of self-help gurus telling you that you need to be
I only
better
know Gary
and
Vee there.
selling you the solution to be
Okay.
it. But the reality is, this business practice is nowhere near new. And people were even doing this as early as 1907. What were people saying?
There's
in
Gary Vee's
1907?
in
Well,
1907.
they were saying that you are only using roughly 10% of your brain. And this slogan kind of got a lot of traction.
What?
It allowed a lot of people to make a lot of money
I'm
selling
saying, before like 1985, I feel like people just did not really do much thinking.
ways to
Like, not agreeing with this, but like people hearing this and then being like, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, only 10% of my brain. Yeah, let's unlock my full potential. I feel like people didn't do much thinking. That still works today, but not to the same scale. Actually, I don't know, but
tap
that's what I'm
into
feeling.
untapped potential within your brain. And from these claims dating back as early as 1907, people to this day still quote and believe that you only use roughly 10% of your brain. But is it really true? Well, according to evidence from studies of brain damage, brain imaging, localization of function within the brain, and even metabolic studies of the brain,
Dude, there's psychology classes talk about every area of the brain and what it functions and what it processes.
people use much more than just 10% of their brains. Now, specifically focusing on the brain imaging studies, out of the countless brain imaging studies that have taken place,
Yeah, like
none
what?
of them have ever shown an area of the brain to be fully silent or inactive.
I mean, they
What
didn't
did
have
find
that
was
stuff
that
back
many
then,
functions of the
so
brain
it
are
makes sense.
highly
But
localized, with different tasks being allocated to different parts of the brain, which is, I think at this point, relatively common knowledge, at least the left and right hemisphere part, but it obviously goes much deeper than that. But that alone kind of just disproves the entire myth that we only use 10% of our brain. It would make no sense for our most vital organ that is literally consuming most of our calories, at least compared to other organs, to be so dormant. It makes almost no sense.
good
And I would
shirt, by
probably
the way.
argue that even when you are
If I wanted a
asleep
shirt that looked
or
like this, I would
potentially
go to
even
the
unconscious, you are
JBLATT
using more than 10% of your brain
link tree and
because
go
of
to
all
the
of the
shop and
unconscious
probably
acts
buy
that your
it.
body's
Cheap too,
consistently
cheap
doing.
price.
I would
Only
even
about
argue that your dad
15,
passed out on the
16,
Thanksgiving table
16,
has more than
17
10% brain
bucks.
activity, even if he only has 10% of a normal brain. Regardless, outside of just imaging studies, neuroscientists have even probed individual, localized micro parts of the brain to test the response of single neurons. And even those tests revealed that there was no gaps or inactive areas. Everywhere that they probed in the brain was able to essentially respond to the
Because I
stimuli,
could move all my
proving
fingers
that
at
all
once.
of the brain
I can
was
read.
active. And whether or not all of the brain
Okay,
is
I'm
doing
reading. I'm
equal
listening to.
quality or efficient work is a different conversation.
That's
But
like
the claim
500
of
different parts of the
90%
brain.
of the brain being unused is completely untrue, at least from a biological standpoint. There may be a separate argument specifically about this conscious versus subconscious mind, but even still, your subconscious mind is active, it's not dormant, it's just not fully within your control. So yeah, good news, you use more than 10% of your brain. The bad news is even 100% of zero IQ is still zero IQ. But regardless of what your IQ score is, I have a video for you. The video you see on screen right now is actually a collab video I made with
Nice. I do see a video there.
Chat
A
History,
little bit.
where we
Oh,
played
there it is. Two idiots played GeoGuessr. I should do GeoGuessr. I might do a GeoGuessr video, but I'm pretty sure it's not free anymore, so we'll see. Anyways, shirt, good shirt, available for purchase for cheap, cheaper than anything, including Shein and Temu. Trust me. Yeah, good video. Next video will probably be like me playing a game or something. But if you're trying to watch another reaction video, there will be one here. Oh wait, no, I'm not even that close. Hold on. One here. I think here. It'll show up here. And yeah. Boom.